The Andy Pollin Show.
We got to go after this with everything we got, figuring they're going to come with everything they got.
I'll start off by saying I'm bored, I'm broke, and I'm back.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630 starts right now.
Well, how about that? Washington Capitals left on the side of the road, left for dead. They're in the playoffs. Alex Ovechkin, career over, right? Wasn't scoring any goals in the first half of the season. Scored a goal last night, his 31st of the year. Okay, not a great OV year in terms of goal scoring, but not horrible. And he's now within 42 of Wayne Gretzky. But more importantly, the Capitals are going to the postseason for the 15th time in the last 17 years. And that's pretty remarkable where they were. They win last night in Philadelphia. We don't know yet whether they're going to play on Saturday or Sunday, but we do know that they're going to play the New York Rangers. And that will be fun. You know, they're playing with house money. The Rangers won the President's Cup. And we've seen what's happened here when the Capitals have won the President's Cup. They haven't done that well in the playoffs. So you never know. And we'll dive into that. Also, Tim Legler with some real interesting thoughts on what's going on in the NBA and who might win the MVP. He was on with Dan Patrick yesterday. We'll play some of that. And we are efforting Colton Cowser for Orioles preview at 10:30. Boy, is he on a heater. Hitting over 400. He's the AL Player of the Week. And the Orioles go for the sweep this afternoon to the Twins at Camden Yards. And our coverage here on ESPN 630 will start at 12:30. So we'll see what happens. But that's the plan for 10:30, that we will have either Colton Cowser or somebody from the Orioles on to talk about a team that's heating up. They're 11-6. They have pulled it within a half game of the Yankees, and to kind of picked up where they left off last year with a lot of injuries, too. Tyler Wells is going on the shelf. He was supposed to start today, but they're worried about elbow soreness, so he's going to sit out for 10 days at least, and they'll figure things out. We don't know who the starting pitcher is today, but I'm sure they'll have somebody out on the mound at 1 o'clock. I have not had time to read this, but whenever I see a story on ESPN that was reported by Don Van Natta and Seth Wickersham, it is a must-read. And this is about Bill Belichick. You know, a lot of their reporting in recent years has been about the dysfunction of the Commanders. And I really think the story that they put out in October of 2022 really paved the way for what happened. It was just about a year ago. It was April of 2023, where they had reached an agreement with the Josh Harris group to sell the team, and finally the deal went through in July. So it's really been their great work, I think, that's had a lot to do with this franchise finally turning around. And by the way, I don't know if you caught this or not, most teams, when they do these one-on-one interviews with prospects for the draft, guys they're thinking about drafting, they bring them in individually. The Commanders had like a draft prospect party, and they brought in Drake Maye and Jaden Daniels and J.J. McCarthy, and they brought in a whole bunch of other players all at once to see how they interact. Yeah, they're real interested in personal relationships and so forth. This is really an interesting thing, the way they're doing things. And they took them all out to Top Golf, a little outing last night. So the joy that we once had about this organization seems to be coming back. Still got a mess of a stadium. The workout facilities got an F- last year from the players. There's a lot of work to do, but they're moving in the right direction, and it's a feel good. As for this story, and again, I've just glanced through it, but let me just read you the first few paragraphs of this. You think, and I'm at this age now, I tell people that most of my friends are either retired or dead. And to see people who are working into their 70s, it's impressive, including Tony. Tony's in his mid-70s and still going strong with what he does with his show here on ESPN 630, which, by the way, you'll hear at 11 o'clock today, and, of course, his work on PTI with Mike Wilbon. But when you get up there, people are looking to push you out the door and looking for a reason to. Bill Belichick may be the greatest coach ever, but his record in recent years hasn't warranted him keeping his job in New England, which he, whether he quit or was fired, he was out there. And apparently, and I would think this too, if you got 6 Super Bowl rings in your collection, you can kind of choose where you want to go. And he did not get the Falcons job. He's going to spend a year out of coaching for the first time since he went to work for Ted Marcia-Broda as kind of an intern, kind of a gopher, in 1975. They're talking close to 50 years. And he did not find a job. But let me just read you the first few paragraphs of this. On the morning of January 25th, a few hours before the Atlanta Falcons named Raheem Morris to be their next head coach, Bill Belichick believed the job was his. The second winningest head coach in NFL history had interviewed twice with the Falcons, a one-on-one session with owner Arthur Blank on his super yacht, followed by a lengthy interview with Blank and team executives at Blank's home after Belichick flew to Atlanta on one of the owner's private jets. From Belichick's perspective, according to sources close to him, he had done everything right. He assured Blank that he wasn't seeking the total control that he had for most of his 24 seasons in New England. He pledged to work with the team's existing group of decision-makers, including general manager Terry Fontenot. Belichick also knew that Blank had checked his references with a group that included Patriots owner Robert Kraft and his son Jonathan. Belichick was in a strange place, unemployed for the first time since 1996, when he was without a job for a few days after Art Modell fired him from the Cleveland Browns. Still at 71, he was confident in his chances, discussing his potential staff, despite all that had transpired in the past few years, including losing seasons and damaged relationships with Tom Brady and the Krafts. Even in Atlanta's crowded field of 14 candidates, including former Michigan head coach Jim Harbaugh, former Tennessee Titans head coach Mike Vrabel, 11 offensive and defensive coordinators, and a defensive line coach, Belichick was confident he would be hired. No other candidate owned 8 Super Bowl rings. And then, like many fans, Belichick was blindsided by news that Atlanta had hired Morris, the Los Angeles Rams defensive coordinator, who had worked for 6 years as an assistant coach and coordinator in Atlanta. Soon, the 7 offseason coaching vacancies outside of New England were filled, all by coaches with lesser resumes. Blank later told reporters that Morris was the right fit for us going forward, made the most sense. I understood the man, understood the history, understood the presence, understood how he had grown. Whenever he was asked about Bill Belichick's failed candidacy prior to the Super Bowl in Las Vegas, Blank always spoke respectfully about the coach with nearly a half-century of experience. A living legend, Blank called him. What Blank didn't say is that he and his top lieutenants had voted on the team's next head coach, ranking each candidate. Bill Belichick didn't even finish in the top 3. And the fall is hard. The fall from the top is devastating. Has to be. I mean, when you're in the open market with 8 Super Bowl rings, including the 2 he won as a coordinator with the Giants, and really, if you look at those Giant teams that won the Super Bowls in 1987, I believe, in 1991, those were defensive-based teams. Bill Parcells was the head coach, but the heart and soul of that team was defense, and the defensive coordinator was Bill Belichick. He was that good. And on the open market, he ranks number 3 on the candidates list for the Atlanta Falcons, who, yes, they were in a Super Bowl after the 2016 season, but haven't been much since. And he can't even crack the top 2. He's number 3. Whew. Shows you, doesn't it? You're riding high in April, shot down in May, and that's Belichick. I mean, if you'd have said 5 years ago, Bill Belichick is on the open market, you would have thought teams would give up anything. They'd give up 5 first-round draft picks to be able to get him. And he's going to spend a year out of coaching, and at 71, I don't know if he's ever going to coach again. It's really interesting. It's really, really incredible, and that's the league. You know, it's not what you did 10 years ago. It's what you did today or yesterday. And recently, without Tom Brady, Bill Belichick has proven. And, you know, we used to call it a silly debate, Brady or Belichick. It ate up a lot of hours on sports radio, let me tell you. And it looks like that debate has been settled. Without Brady, Belichick is... Well, he's Cleveland Bill Belichick, you know, and yes, he will be in the Hall of Fame, and he will go down as one of the greatest coaches of all time. But we put the one of in front of coaches because at one point it was, oh yeah, with 6 rings, he's the greatest. And to finish number three among candidates for the Atlanta Falcons. Wow, crazy. All right, Capitals. Yes, This was the conclusion last night in Philadelphia.
Back to Carlson. He feeds it out to center. Starts spreading the news. The Capitals are going to the postseason. They are going to the 2024 Stanley Cup playoffs. Good morning, good afternoon, and good night, Philadelphia. The Capitals take on the Rangers in Game 1 this weekend at Madison Square Garden. The party on the ice down below. The Capitals have done it. They are going to the postseason after beating the Flyers. Final score 2-1.
John Walton, voice of the Capitals, with almost the same enthusiasm that he had 2018, right? 2018 is when they won the Cup. They won it the year before the Nationals won the World Series. And for this team, it's not quite the Stanley Cup, and it's a long way to go to get one. And they got the highest odds, I think, among the highest odds of not getting it among the playoff teams. But they are in the playoffs, and this is a team that went through a 6-game winless streak recently. They had traded away Anthony Mantha, 20-goal scorer, at the break. Kuznetsov was traded away. They finally have given up on him. Nicholas Backstrom tried to play this year with a bad hip. Looks like his career is over. And here they are. Here they are in the playoffs. And Alex Ovechkin scored his 31st goal last night. So that leaves him 42 short of Wayne Gretzky going into next year. And in the middle of the season, we said, oh, well, no way he's going to break the record next year. You know how many goals Alex Ovechkin had last year? 42. And he had 31 this year, but if you look at how the goals came, probably, I don't have these numbers in front of me, but I'm guessing 20 of those came in the last 2 months of the season, that, he finally caught fire and finally got hot with a new system. So with familiarity with the system going into next year, can he have another 42-goal season? Well, I'll tell you what, just a couple of years ago, 2022, he had 50 goals at the age of 36. So he's not quite 40. And, he may play even past breaking the record, but the record is within reach next year. It was a little bit of a reach, but it's within reach. And if he doesn't get it, well, he will certainly get it the season after that. So reports of Ovechkin's demise were greatly exaggerated. As for Spencer Carberry, coming in as a rookie coach, he had coached in Hershey, never coached in the NHL before, and got the players to believe when they were going through a rough stretch. And look, they're still not scoring goals. They're one of 2 teams this year that had a negative goal differential. Only 2 teams did it this year, but realize this. They are the first 2 teams to do it since 1994. So it had been 30 years since we had a team in the playoffs with a negative goal differential, and the Capitals are one of them this year. There's 2 teams, and that, I think, points to how Carberry has managed to hold things together through all the turmoil, and was somewhat emotional last night talking about it with the media.
Pretty surreal. I don't think I actually conceptualized this moment of us being and reaching our goal to get back into the Stanley Cup playoffs, and then when it happens, you're a little bit taken back and just proud, really, really proud of the group. Today was once again emblematic of what this group has done all year long. On a back-to-back, you could tell we were completely out of gas, and we were just fighting for every shift just to take strides, just to make sure pucks got out. And that third period, I thought we had a good conversation in between the second and third about what we were going to need to do, what was going to be required in that third period. And I thought the guys dug in and did an excellent job in that third period and found a way. We find a way to get into the Stanley Cup playoffs.
You guys rallied around the idea of something to prove from the beginning of this year. What have you proven by getting back in the playoffs? A lot. You could see the faces in that room, whether you're John Carlson or you're Hendrix Lapierre, Connor McMichael. That they all have different things. They're all at different stages in their careers, in their lives. But you could tell, no matter what your situation, whether you're playing in your first year, like a lot of our guys are, or you're playing in your 17th season, this group, you could tell how bad they wanted to find ways to win every night. And we were talking like we were in Edmonton. I don't even remember the score, but it was not good. But then this group, it didn't get them, you know what, that's it. Everybody's counted us out. Let's just finish out the season. The next night, we grind and find a way to win in Seattle and put everything we had, all 20 guys into that game. And that's just what we've done all year, and tonight was no different.
Hats off to Spencer Carberry, and it's really an interesting matchup in the opening round because you're playing the Peter Laviolette-coached New York Rangers. Laviolette didn't get this team in the playoffs last year with these veteran players, and now he's won the President's Cup in New York. And, boy, you talk about opportunity here with this young coach and Spencer Carberry, the mix of the veterans like TJ. Well, look, the two guys who are kind of the backbone of that Stanley Cup championship team, which is now 6 years. I mean, that's half of a career there. TJ Oshie delivering the empty net goal for the game winner, and Alex Ovechkin getting his 31st goal to put them up 1-0. Now, it was kind of ironic. Not ironic, that's probably not the right word, but it was bizarre, the circumstances surrounding this game where you had four teams fighting for this one spot. And if you're watching the game last night, they did a really good job, and they always do a good job. I mean, Beninati and Locke are the best. But they're talking about Tortorella, the coach of the Flyers. He's got a tough decision to make because he can't take this game to overtime. Doesn't matter if they win in overtime. If they go to overtime, they're out of it. So he pulls the goalie early. There's that going on. And there's also another game which has bearing on whether or not they make the playoffs. And Detroit scored with 3 seconds left to force overtime at Montreal just before the Oshie goal went in. So the Oshie goal turns out to be kind of inconsequential for the Flyers because they had been eliminated just a few seconds earlier with Detroit scoring to send the game against Montreal into overtime. But they're out. Pittsburgh is out. The Flyers are out. And the Capitals are moving on with the Oshie empty netter. We'll hear from him as he talked to Al Koken in the next hour. But I want to get to what Tim Legler said about a variety of things in the NBA. And it was 60 years ago today that a game-changing car was introduced by the Ford Motor Company, selling for $2,300. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.
The Andy Pollin Show on ESPN 630, the sports capital.
Orioles preview coming up at 10:30. Orioles are on a roll. They're going for the sweep of the Twins this afternoon. Coverage here 12:30. They pulled to within a half game of first place. And aside from some pitching concerns, including Tyler Wells, who's going on the injured list, they're in really good shape. They're looking like a good team right now. I talked about Bill Belichick and the story that's come out from Seth Wickersham and Don Van Natta today about how he wound up as the third place candidate for the Atlanta Falcons job, and there was no interest in him in other places, and it's really remarkable for someone who was regarded and maybe still be as regarded as the greatest coach of all time, but can't get a job. And the fall is tough to watch, as it is for Klay Thompson. Klay Thompson last night in a game that the Warriors had to win to keep their season alive. This was basically an elimination game for them, as they were, well, it's an elimination game, and they were playing the Sacramento Kings. The winner would move on to play the loser of last night's Lakers-Pelicans game. So that was the Pelicans who lost last night, and they're going to match up against the Kings. But the Golden State Warriors, the greatest dynasty of recent vintage, with 4 championships, they were eliminated with a 118-94 loss, and Klay Thompson, one of the Splash Brothers, played 32 minutes, did not score a single point. The only other scoreless game under Steve Kerr, who's been their coach for the last 10 years, was when he was ejected just over a minute into a game against the Minnesota Timberwolves in November. He's going to be a free agent. He's 34 years old. He's part of the success, a big part of the success that they had. But do you re-sign him? He had those 2 major leg injuries, and he came back from them. Cost him 2 seasons, a knee injury followed by an Achilles tear. but he came back, and he had been good and had the opportunity to sign a contract extension in this past offseason, couldn't get it done. And, I mean, do you sign him out of loyalty? 32 minutes in a key game without a point. Average 17.9 points a game, lowest scoring average since his third year. Shot 38.7% from three. He is regarded as maybe the second best three-point shooter of all time next to Steph Curry, the Splash Brothers, but maybe over for him. And then Zion Williamson, yeah, his team is going to live another day to play the Kings, but he got hurt last night in their loss to the Lakers. He left with 3 minutes left to play, and it appears, according to reports, that he's got a hamstring injury. Is he going to be ready to go Friday against the Kings? Hard to say, but this looked like the year where he'd finally turned the corner, and he played great before he got hurt. 36 minutes, 40 points, 11 rebounds. He looked like the Zion who was going to change the NBA, number one pick of the draft. He may not be able to go. The winner of that game will face Oklahoma City in the first round. That would be, the top seed in the West. Unlikely that they would get past them, but, the season can extend for one of the two teams, and without Zion, I would say the Pelicans are pretty much cooked. Tim Legler yesterday on the Dan Patrick Show, and they were talking about MVP, and probably this goes, probably to the days of Michael Jordan, though he's a different type of player and doesn't have that, all the endorsements that he had and the spectacular plays. He just plays great basketball, does a lot of fundamental things on the court, but probably doesn't get recognized for it. And though he has won multiple MVPs, you could make the case that Nikola Jokic should win the MVP again. Will he? Doesn't look like that's going to happen. But Tim Legler, who watches more basketball with a trained eye than probably anybody, NBA basketball for sure, says, it doesn't seem right that Jokic is not getting better consideration to be the MVP this year.
He'd get my vote. It'd be very close. I actually think if Dallas had another 10 games to play, I think Luka could have run him down in the home stretch because Dallas has been unbelievable since they made their acquisitions at the trading deadline. Luka's had the best individual season of any player in the league. You can't argue it. He's created more offense between scoring and facilitating than any player in history. It's the best individual season in the league, no question about it. But when you have another really viable candidate, and it's close, which obviously Joker is in that category, it's hard to dismiss the win gap between the two teams. It just is. It's hard to dismiss that. That's why I say if Dallas could have played 10 more games, they may shrink that gap to 2 or 3. Now it's a toss-up in terms of the winning. Now I think Luka's had a better year, and it would be him, but I don't think he quite was able to run him down. So I think Jokic is going to win his third in 4 years.
Yeah, I agree with you with Luka, but it's almost, and we liken Luka to Josh Allen in the NFL. Like we keep waiting for him to take that next step. And maybe this is the year, and he's relatively young, but it's quick how we kind of move on. Like Jason Tatum, like certain guys were like, let's move on to the next guy. We're waiting. Yeah. Anthony Edwards is here and Shai Gilgeous. Jason Tatum's still a wonderful player, but it's like you got your window to capture our imagination. And then if you don't capitalize, we're like, all right, let's talk about Victor Wembanyama.
Listen, you're 100% right. There's no doubt that's what happened. And actually what happened with Jokic, if he were to win it again, there aren't a lot of examples historically where, you get that hot name, you win a couple, which he did, and then they go in a different direction, the voters, and then you come back and get another one. Like, it's hard to do that. Once they've kind of moved on, it's hard to do that. But I think what helped him clearly was Embiid going down. Embiid at the time he got hurt I think he had it in his grasp to win back-to-back MVPs. And I think Philadelphia would have been within striking distance of the Celtics. They would have been the 2 seed in the East. They would have been, the Celtics won, 64 games? They would have probably been upper 50s, 58, 59. There wouldn't have been the gap you have now between them and the Knicks. The Sixers would have been in there if he didn't get hurt. And with what he was doing statistically, I think Embiid had a great chance to win it. Once he went down, it opened it all up for everyone again. And that's when I think you got back to the appreciation of what this guy is doing every single night. And so I think he's going to win it. I don't know who's going to finish second between Luka and Shai. I think Shai's going to get a lot of votes because it's such a young team. No one expected them to be the 1 seed in the West. That deserves a lot of credit when you're a 30-point scorer. It's driven around you. For me personally, it would be Luka 2, Shea 3, and then actually my fourth guy would be Brunson. I think Brunson deserves to be on the ballot. Like, you're going to vote for 5 people, his name's going to be written in there to some extent, where when you add up the totality of the points, he's got a great shot, I think, to finish 4th. He and Giannis probably 4 and 5, round out that 5.
Tim Legler, the former three-point shooting contest champ and an analyst with the mothership. Also, LeBron hasn't won an MVP in over a decade.
Right. Yeah.
They kind of like, we moved on. We take him for granted.
4 and 5 years, I believe, and then that was a wrap on that, and you move on. I always describe the guys that are in line as being at like the counter, the deli counter at the grocery store, right? Where you take your number and you kind of stand there and wait for your order, because it's eventually those guys are going to get MVP consideration or win one. And you start checking the list. Okay, who doesn't have one yet? Okay, now he's got one. And there's always like this core group of young players like Tatum, you would expect has to get one. The problem is, it's so weird, is he's been in the running the last 3 years. Now what happened was they made their team so good it actually hurts his chances. That's how bizarre the whole thing is. Like, well, you have that much help, of course you're not going to get MVP votes when he's exactly the same player. But because of the help around him and the emergence of Jaylen Brown is playing his best, now they go, well, now you can't win it. Like, I don't think Tatum finishes in the top 5. And they have the best record in the league, and he's been in the top 5 multiple times. But this year he won't, despite the fact it's his best team. Like, that's kind of the logic behind it. And Embiid was on that list, got his. So I don't know if he'll get another one. And then with the injuries and everything else, Luka, obviously, it's going to be his turn eventually. He's going to get one. So there's guys in the waiting, and once they get it, you kind of move on from the guy that's the perennial winner. And that's eventually going to happen to Jokic, but I don't think it's going to happen this year.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's just like Jordan. He could have given it to him every year, but you got to give it to somebody else. Now, Allen Iverson probably deserved it the year he got it, but there were some other years where you go, really? Jordan's not the MVP? I'd take him number 1 if I had the opportunity. Tom Lovero's got a column, before we get to part 2 of the Legler conversation. Tom's got a column today about the Wizards, and it's pretty clear that the Wizards needed to have this year, last year, when you had the Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes. With their whopping 15 wins, lowest in franchise history, worst record in team history, 15-67. They have the same odds as the number 1 pick as the 14-win Detroit Pistons. It's 14% when they have the draft lottery next month. The problem is, this is not a good draft. Well, last year you had Victor Wembanyama. And so Tom's column is basically about what a bunch of schlemiels this organization is, even with the new names that they have. Michael Winger, who's the president of the team, and general manager Will Dawkins. And Tom says this is supposed to be the first step towards a rebuild of the team, though the new brain trust abhors the word rebuild. But rebuild is generally recognized as a necessary, if painful, process. Certainly losing while you were trying to win didn't work, so why not try losing by design? Of course, in Wizards-like fashion, the timing isn't great. It's not a good draft. More from Tom. It appeared that the new brain trust was going to sabotage this plan when they traded with Golden State to acquire Jordan Poole, who had worn out his welcome there, but was still considered a young, talented player who could perhaps lift the Wizards above the needed level of losses to reap the rewards in the NBA draft. Turns out there was nothing to worry about. They traded for the biggest punchline in the league. Poole has been a disaster, 3rd worst plus-minus number in the NBA this year, at 552. His company, Tyus Jones, 5th worst at minus 497. Corey Kispert had a minus 445. Rookie Bilal Coulibaly, who showed flashes of reasons to be optimistic about his future, posted a minus 419 number. You're going to lose. You're going to have those numbers. That goes with the territory. But then he talks about Kyle Kuzma, who was praised for turning down a trade to the Dallas Mavericks. And at the time he said, although I have good relationships in the Dallas organization, this probably wasn't the right time for me in my career, especially just trying to build something here. That's something I don't shy away from. So I think it was the biggest factor. There's not too many contending teams. Going into the right situation is always the most important thing in the NBA. And so Tom says, let's break this down for a minute. Kuzma passed on a chance to play on a 50-win team with an owner who is legendary for treating his players well, Mark Cuban, and instead opted to stay with the team that would go on to lose 67 games this season and may lose over 100 games over the next 2 years. By the way, I did read something yesterday where Kuzma is opening a restaurant. I mean, this makes me laugh because Jay Schrader, who had one really good year in Washington as the quarterback, 1986, got them to the NFC Championship game. He opened up a restaurant called Jay Schrader's All-Pro Restaurant. Didn't make a Pro Bowl, but he called it All-Pro. And by the time he was shipped out of here, just at the start of the 1988 season, he had been third string. So it didn't work out. I don't think it's going to work that way for Kuzma, but Kuzma seems to be wanting to make himself comfortable here, where he's probably going to be a pretty good piece that they can trade away for either prospects or draft picks. Meantime, you have Victor Wembanyama, and though he is going to be great and has looked great at times, the team was bad this year, and maybe that was by design because they're going to be picking, they think they have the fourth best lottery odds, so they're going to be picking high in the draft as well, and they've got to add some pieces around him. But Legler, looking at Wembanyama, says you don't have to look really at the record to see what you got here. You got to look at his progression throughout the season, and this was Dan Patrick with Legler yesterday about the Wembanyama development.
First of all, what's San Antonio do to make him better next year? And do you agree that, as he said, hey, I've only shown you 50%?
No question about it. The league's in trouble. The league is in trouble. And I agree with you. And so obviously you didn't have a reason to watch the Spurs except for him. So as the season's going on, I'm covering the whole league. I'm watching other teams that are more relevant to the postseason, but I'd always make sure I got one Spurs game in a week because I wanted to see the progression. And I agree with you. The beginning of the year, first 20 games at least, he didn't really have a purpose offensively. He kind of drifted around. He spent way more time on the perimeter than he did anywhere near the paint. They didn't run anything for him. By design, Greg Popovich wanted to deflect all pressure away from him. Like, we're not going to come down and run ISOs for this guy when he's not physically strong enough or has the confidence yet to operate because he's going to look bad. And we're going to deflect that, so we don't care how many games we win. And that's the approach they took. And as a result, you win, 15 games, whatever it is. So that's the approach they took. But as you watched him, each month, even if you watched him once, say, wow, now he's running the floor and he's getting a guy on his back and he's turning and sealing that guy and putting his arm up and he's holding his position and demanding the basketball. Look at the way now he's handling the ball in traffic, which was something we saw on film against weak competition before he came to the league. And then early on, it was like, wow, that's a steal. That's a deflection. That's a strip. Now, not so much. He can operate as a guy 7'4", handling the ball like that, and it looks amazing. He's shooting turnaround jumpers in the post over people, big guys, and he's having no hesitation whatsoever. His defensive presence and the ground he covers is unique unto him. He makes plays every night defensively that he's the only player in the league that can make that particular play. So when you look at the totality of it, the league's in trouble with a guy that does this many things well at this size. Now, to your point, what do they need to add? You're 100% right, Dan. You've got to go out and get a veteran, accomplished point guard. Someone to set the table, put guys in position, give him the ball in easier places to succeed. They didn't really have that. They got a couple of nice young wings that I like that can score. They don't have that leadership at the point guard position. Everybody thought Fred VanVleet had an opportunity to end up there last year. That would have been a tremendous acquisition for Wemby. He ended up in Houston. So now they'll hit this summer and they'll continue to look because that's something you need to do to help him max out and get where he needs to be to help you contend sooner rather than later.
That's Tim Legler on Victor Wembanyama, and be interesting to see what the Spurs do next year. Again, there's no transformational player to add to him. So as Legler said, they got to get a veteran point guard who can help to set him up and some other good pieces around him. But everything that we thought he was going to be, he has been this year and has gotten better. The problem is the team wasn't very good. He didn't lift them to wins, which maybe was by design. And as he said, I've only shown you 50%. And when Legler says the league is in trouble, that's an educated view. That's not just somebody going, oh my God, that's someone who's watched a lot of basketball, played in the NBA for 10 years, and understands what this guy is doing. So 2-3 years from now, we may be looking at the next in this progression. You know, now we start to have could we be having this? That'd be an interesting thought. Could we be having the argument about Victor Wembanyama being the best player of all time within the next 5 years? I don't think LeBron ever surpassed Jordan. Won't do it for me. Does for others, not for me. Wembanyama surpassing both of them, is it possible? Maybe. I mean, we judge by championships, but Greg Popovich, and that's another interesting name, was we were starting the show with Bill Belichick, and the story at ESPN today that at 71, he couldn't even crack the top 2 for candidates for the Atlanta Falcons. He was their third choice, never really in the running. With his 8 Super Bowl rings, 2 of them as an assistant with the Giants, and the 6 that he won with the New England Patriots as the head coach. And Greg Popovich, who's I think 75 now, signed up for 4 more years. 4 more years. 4 more years. Coming up, some more yak about the Caps. Clyde Christensen on what the Commanders will be getting if, in fact, they take Drake Maye, and Orioles preview. We hope to talk to Colton Cowser. We'll see you as the American League Player of the Week. Stay with us. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630. All right, we got our act together. There was some doubt about who will be our Orioles guest for Orioles preview. We got that nailed down. We could not get Colton Cowser today, but we do have Kevin Brown, who does an excellent job on television with the Orioles broadcast. And the Orioles are back where they should be. They're knocking on the door of the Yankees. They pulled within a half a game of them last night with an 11-3 win over the Twins. They go for the sweep this afternoon. It's a 1 o'clock start. Coverage here will begin at 12:30. And we'll ask them about what is different this year from last year, when it was kind of a surprise that they were as good as they were. And they have lost 6 games. They do have some injuries to be concerned about. Tyler Wells is going on the shelf with elbow soreness, I believe. And we don't know who the starting pitcher will be today, but we'll ask Kevin about that and talk about other good things regarding the Orioles. As you know, the Capitals are going to the Stanley Cup playoffs. And Rex Minturn is here today, old enough to remember the Stanley Cup championship and the great excitement that we had here, which was 6 years ago. Were you in college yet or high school?
I was just graduating high school.
Okay, so that was a cool time to be you know, at that age, because you could drive and you go downtown to watch.
I was there that night.
At
I
the
was
game.
down there. Yeah,
down. This is when they won the cup in Vegas.
Yeah.
You were and they were showing it on big screens. It was huge, and it was exciting, and it should have been exciting. But last night kind of took on an odd feel in that, okay, they're going in as the 8th seed. They have virtually no chance to win the Stanley Cup, but the excitement over getting there off what they did, where they finally saw the end of the Kuzi era. They trade away Anthony Mantha, 20-goal scorer at the deadline. You have injuries. They had gone through a 6-game winless streak, like 2 weeks ago. So I sensed like real excitement last night.
Yeah, I mean, it's just the whole DC sports situation is so bad right now that it's just, I'm just happy to have some playoffs in my life.
Yeah, that's true. So we didn't have the Caps in the playoffs last year. The Wizards, who knows when they'll get back in. And I think the thing that compounded things this year was Maryland basketball being bad. We had the women make it. They got knocked out in the first round. Howard, that's not a mainstream school, but it was nice to see what they did, but they got knocked out in the first round. So, even if the Capitals get swept, it felt good last night. And the way they did it, the way they advanced was with the old-timers, Alex Ovechkin, who looked like, oh, man, he's out of gas, and they're going to have to push this car over the finish line for him to pass Wayne Gretzky. Well, he's now got 31 goals, and he had, I believe, 24 of them in like the last 35 games or something like that. I mean, it looked like he was going to finish the season in the teens. He gets 31, and he's now within 42 goals of passing Gretzky. And last year, that was his goal total. Can he do it again next year? Who knows? But, it looks like if he has a decent year next year, sometime early in the 2025-26 season, he is going to break the record. As for Oshie, there are reports that this is his last year. He's the one that got up after they won the Cup and said, back to back, and they got knocked out
in the first round. But he is now going back to the playoffs. If it's a swan song, it's the way to go. But talked to Al Koken after the game about scoring the empty netter, which won the game.
TJ, I know how much you and the team hated missing the playoffs last year. Your goal got them back in. What does it feel like?
It feels great, obviously. Obviously they had to pull the goalie. They needed 2 points in regulation. So, but the boys battled hard tonight. That was a great game. I mean, Philly pushed and pushed and pushed and pushed, and I think that goes into overtime and is probably one of the game 82 greats right there, instant classic. But it was nice to get the win, obviously, with the pull goalie and the empty net there.
With all the injuries, all the new faces, how did you guys pull this together?
We're a team in there. We've been building something special here for the whole season, and it started with a change of systems, a change of personnel, losing our number 1 and number 2 center eventually, and guys just constantly stepped up to the plate and paid the price to get the job done. So ton of character in that room, and I'm super proud to be one of their brothers.
Yeah, and one of the things that you need at this time is veteran leadership, and he's got that. His wife may have jumped the gun a little bit. His wife put out something that she wanted to make playoff jackets like a month ago or 3 weeks ago, and then they went through that 6-game winless streak. Oh, that doesn't look good. Now I guess you can roll out the playoff jackets and feel good about that. And also, look, when you have a team that gets hot and makes a run, it's almost always dependent on a great goalie. And if you go back to 1998, which is the first time they made the finals, Ole Kolzig was great. He was just tremendous. Braden Holtby, when they won the Cup, was tremendous. And right now they're riding that hot goalie, and especially they're not scoring goals. They're one of 2 teams this year to make it into the playoffs with a negative goal differential. That hadn't happened since 1994. 30 years between teams making the playoffs with a negative goal differential. Caps had that this year, and a lot of it is credited to Charlie Lindgren, who, as they say, has stood on his head. And he also talked to Koken after the game.
Feels really good. Obviously, it's been quite the journey here the last couple months, it seems. It's been a pretty unbelievable process, just us feeling like we're maybe not going to make it, and then we push hard, we don't give up, and we find our way in at the end of the day, and couldn't be more excited, honestly. I love this team so much. We got a really close group of guys in there, and we fight for each other, and I'm happy it's not over yet.
It's amazing when you look at what this roster was in Game 1 and what it was in Game 82 to get you across the finish line. What does it say about this team to be able to adapt to all these ups and downs, injuries, new faces?
Yeah, I think, again, I've been preaching it all year. It starts at the top. It starts with the leadership core. It starts with O. It starts with Carly. It starts with Osh, Dowder. We got a really good nucleus of leaders. And then we got young guys that are, not just their experience because they won down in the American League, but they're also guys that are very competitive and they want to come up right away and make their mark. And you can see that they're every time they get out on that ice, they're chomping at the bit to get out there, and they're trying to, they're trying to make an impression. I think they're trying to. They know what the standard's been set by the older guys, and the younger guys are trying to live up to that standard. And it's been like you said, it's the roster right now compared to what it was day one. It's a heck of a lot different, but I think the standard's still there.
I can't let you go, though, without complimenting you. You were the guy who kind of really grabbed this and ran down the rest of the way as sort of the number one goaltender, leaned on, and now a back-to-back situation. What really made the difference for you as this season went on?
Well, first off, I'm so grateful for the opportunity to go out and compete every day. And obviously I had the opportunity to play a lot of games here in the last couple months, and it's certainly something I don't take for granted. Every time out on that ice, I want to make the most of it, and I can never get enough hockey. I love playing, I love competing, and I especially love playing for the Capitals. I love playing with these guys in the locker room. So like I said, I'm extremely happy to get in the dance, and it'll be a really fun test.
He's finally going to get some rest, too, playing back-to-back, the home game against Boston the other night and last night in Philadelphia playing. So they've got until at least Saturday. We don't know yet whether it's going to be a Saturday or Sunday start at Madison Square Garden, but we do know that they're taking on the New York Rangers, and they are in the playoffs after not being there last year. And Peter Laviolette, who coached the Rangers to the President's Cup, best regular season record, now facing the team that he coached last year and did not get into the playoffs. So it makes for a very interesting matchup. As for the football, Clyde Christensen, he's one of those names that you hear, kind of floating around like quarterback guru, and you can't question who he's worked with. He's worked with Peyton Manning. He's worked with Andrew Luck. He was a quarterback's coach in Tampa Bay when they had a guy named Brady there and won a Super Bowl. And this past couple of years, he's been what they call an offensive consultant with North Carolina. Doesn't do any coaching, but gives some friendly advice, looks at the numbers, looks at the tape, things like that. And now this is going to be a little bit, biased when you look at these different, analysis of these quarterbacks, because everybody's got their guy, and he's obviously going to be partial to him, working at North Carolina and seeing him over the last 2 years. But he was on the John Keim podcast the other day, and this is his analysis of what Washington would be getting if, in fact, they take Drake Maye with the number 2 pick.
I think he's special. I think he's a special kid, and starting with his makeup, just that he's from a great family. He's got 4 boys. He's a humble, extremely bright guy. He has a lot of the same characteristics that a lot of the really good, successful, long-term players I've been around have. That he's smart, he gets it, he's aware. His teammates play hard for him, have a love for him, and which I think are all great starts. And then he's a 6'4.5" kid who's extremely athletic, and he's been a 2-year starter and made a bunch of big plays, and 2 different coordinators, 2 different systems in 2 years. But I think it's going to be an arrow up, and he's going to keep getting better, because he's hungry. He wants to be a great player, and he's got an awful lot of tools to work with, and his makeup gives him a chance to handle the NFL schedule and whatever the NFL throws at him.
I know he comes from a family. There's some athletes in that family. So
there are.
How do you see when that's the case? It's probably a highly competitive family. So how do you see that with him? Like where do you see that kind of trait with him?
You know what? I love that. They kind of almost have their own little team. They got the 4 boys and the dad, and they compete at everything. And so I think one of the traits you like is that that he kind of grew up in a team atmosphere. I've golfed with him. I've watched him throw. He brings a couple of his brothers out to catch balls for him at some of the workouts, and he's coaching them up. And but they have a great fondness for each other. They get along well, but they compete like crazy. And I think they want to win everything, and whatever you do, they enjoy winning. And so I think that probably his competitive streak shows up through that, and that would be one thing that just jumps out at you. And his ability to quote unquote play well with others, I think, jumps out at me, just with his family and just the history. He's I think he's the youngest, and he's second to youngest. And he's just watched his brothers, and he's seen it all. He's seen some high highs and low lows and some disappointments, and I think that bodes well for you in the NFL, knowing that you're probably going to touch all the bases before it's all said and done. There's going to be some adversity. There's going to be some awful great moments, and but to do it for a decade or decade and a half, you just have to have a resilience and an endurance to you that I think he has, and I think that's going to serve him extremely well. There won't be a big ups and downs. It'll be just kind of a steady progression and improvement, I think, throughout his whole pro career.
It's Clyde Christensen, quarterback guru on Drake Maye. Maye is the youngest of 4. I got Rex here, and Rex, how many brothers do you have? 2?
2. Yeah.
2. So you're the youngest of 3?
4. Boys? I have a sister.
But you're 3 boys. You're the youngest. Has that made you more or less competitive, do you think?
I don't know.
Well, wait a minute. One way or another.
No, I don't know. I don't know how I would turn out.
Okay, but I mean, do you consider yourself? You play at a high level of soccer. Do you consider yourself to be a competitive person?
Yeah, not freakishly though.
Okay. But do you think you overachieved or underachieved? When you look back, you can have regrets, right?
Yeah. Probably under.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. So it doesn't always work that being the young. But this family seems to be ultra competitive, so that may be a plus in his favor. As far as leadership style goes, He's going to use the name Tom here. That's Tom Brady, who he coached. Again, Clyde Christensen on Drake Maye.
It would be similar to Tom, that I think he would have a leadership style of caring, that they know he cares for him. He's one of the guys. He's going to make his point, but he's not going to degrade or put anyone down, but he is going to make his point. He's going to make his point, and hey, we have to do this better. Hey, we have to get our depth on that route. Hey, but he's also going to take responsibility. Hey, I missed you. He's going to take more than his share. And I think some of the best ones do that. Hey, I've got to get that ball to you. So I think they take their responsibility. So his leadership style would be, I think, one of caring for his teammates and being one of the team. And the quarterback position sometimes can be kind of a elevated position, and he's not that. He's going to be one of the guys that are going to play hard. I remember when we picked up Tom in Tampa Bay, and I called as many people as I knew played for him, and every person I knew who played for him, and you couldn't find one person who didn't say he was the best teammate they'd ever had. So I think that's a great trait to have, and I think probably you'd find the same thing if you started dialing up his Tar Heel teammates. That you'd have a hard time finding someone who didn't think the world of him.
I have not watched the Patriot documentary. I think it's on Apple TV. But what I've heard is that Brady comes across as just the guy, and he never let all the success get to his head. Now, Maye has had limited success. He's quarterback there for 2 years. But, yeah, that's a good thing. I love when Christensen says when we picked up Brady, like he was on the waiver wire. He chose you, and you had to call people to find out about him. I thought that was interesting as well. More on Drake Maye, and this is I had not heard this comparison before, but it's one that would be good. I mean, I hope he lasts longer, but if he's this good, that would be a bonanza. This is Christensen on the quarterback that he compares Drake Maye to.
He reminds me a lot of Andrew. He's very, very athletic. He can run. He's deceivingly fast. And Andrew was off the charts processor of information. He picked it up extremely quickly. And he had a humility to him, I think, that made people want to play for him. And I think this guy reminds me a lot of Andrew that way. He's not quite as sturdy built. He's a little more linear built, but he's a tough guy. And like Andrew, I think he's going to have to learn how to protect himself, which was probably the hardest thing, the hardest teacher, the hardest to learn for Andrew, was just when you give up on a play, when, it's hard for these guys to give up on plays. And I think Drake will have a little bit of a struggle, and hopefully learns it sooner than later. And but they don't mess around in that league with quarterbacks. They like to obliterate you. And so you have to help protect yourself along with the other 10 guys. So that'll be I think the biggest learn for him is just taking care of himself and protecting himself, because he is a good athlete. He is going to run for some yards. He is going to convert some third downs, with his legs and stuff. He's going to make some big plays out of the pocket. So that'll be one thing. But I'd probably compare him to Andrew, just same kind of, I would describe Andrew and, probably him as, they try and come across as kind of an aw shucks guy, but they're bright as all get out, and they know exactly what's going on. But then I think is their humility coming through, and they don't want to seem smarter, better, bigger than anybody else on the team. In fact, they want to shrink in size as far as the team goes.
Right. I remember when Andrew Luck was coming out, and Mel Kiper said, "This is Peyton Manning with athleticism." And he probably was. The problem was he lasted 5.5 years. And whether it was the Colts not protecting him well enough or he not protecting himself well enough, he didn't last. He also, I don't know if he loved football like some. He was really good at it, and I guess had to like it to some degree to be as good as he was, but walked away because of a calf injury. He had made it back from the shoulder injury. Remember, he missed all of 2017 with the shoulder, came back in 2018, was the comeback player of the year, getting ready to play in 2019, had a calf injury, and then said, that's it, I'm done. I don't know if that happens with Drake Maye, but if you get 5.5 years out of Drake Maye that are as good as Andrew Luck, you'd probably take that right now. The other thing about Maye that you hear is he's not ready to play yet. He's only played 2 years of college football. It's going to take some time. Best bet is to let him sit for a while. Christensen does not agree with that.
It's hard to learn if you're not playing. It's hard to get it. And Peyton always would push that. Just that you got to play. You got to get play. You got to get snaps under your belt. So I think sooner's better. Sometimes that's a curse for a high draft pick because you tend to go to teams that have a bunch of needs and aren't great, and it's a hard position to play when you don't have the supporting cast and the whole city thinks you're going to save the city, and it just doesn't happen quite as quick or as easily as people think it does, and so I don't think that, and I've heard a lot of talk that it's not the I'm not sure I agree with the pundits, so to speak, and some people love him, which I would be in that category, that this guy's the college offenses are different. Everything's about tempo. Everything's about, hey, let's get 90 plays and in that 90 plays, there's going to be some good ones, and we're going to live with some bad ones. So it's not going to be as structured. I don't think you see these college quarterbacks just sitting in the pocket and looking pro style. There's very few of them that have been raised that way through the college years. So it's a learn that way. But I also think it has been a little bit unfair, unfair with Drake saying, well, he doesn't set his feet and I think some of that's been our fault, just protection wise. I think some of it's been our fault, just two different coordinators in 2 years, and He's only played 2 years. So this guy's going to learn it. This guy's going to get it. You're going to teach him this stuff once, and he's going to learn it, and he's not going to have any problem with that. And I disagree with anybody who didn't think this guy isn't one of the top picks in the draft.
Well, some say he's not even a first rounder, but he could go number 2. He could go number 10. Who knows? But all of the quarterbacks that the Commanders are considering, including Michael Penix, are still in Ashburn, as far as I know. They were they had an event last night. They went to Top Golf, and you had J.J. McCarthy. You had Drake Maye there, and you had Jaden Daniels as well, and they just want to see how they mix with one another. A couple more things from Clyde Christensen. This is on some of the criticism of Maye, that while he makes some spectacular plays, he has some easy ones that he misses. The missed layups. Here's his answer to that.
Yeah, there may have been a missed layup or two, but this kid's going to hit open guys. There might be a missed layup or two, but there's been an awful lot of half-court game winners too. So I like he's going to make his layups. He's going to make his layups, and it's going to get tightened up a little bit. And doing it for a living is another thing. You do it for a living, and all of a sudden you're doing it all day long. You're not in class, and you're not doing this or that around the campus. And I think he's not going to. This kid's not going to have trouble with layups. This guy's going to make his layups, and I don't have any doubt about that.
Last thing from Clyde Christensen, offensive consultant at North Carolina, has watched Drake Maye last couple of years, John Keim podcast. If you could look at a couple of things that you would want him to improve on, what would they be?
One is he's got to tighten up his footwork and just the structure, maybe shorten his stroke, and just some of the fundamentals things that I think being in a good system will do for him, and doing it full time like he's going to be doing it now. I think that's one. And then also just learning to protect himself. I think a lot of these new guys, a lot of this new quarterbacking group, they play reckless, which the fans admire, but again, you need them for all 17 games. You just, you don't have a chance without them, and they got to stay healthy, and you got to the system has to protect them. The coaches got to protect them. Play callers got to protect them. The Lions got to protect them. The route running has to protect them, and then they have to protect themselves. And that's I think he's going to have to learn that. It's a hard teach. It's a hard teach. I think I always say I think I failed twice. I think I failed trying to teach that to Andrew, and I think I failed with Jameis. That those guys played reckless. They threw their bodies around, and it's an extremely hard thing to teach. And so this guy will have to learn that, but he'll tighten up the footwork. He'll shorten his stroke. He's going to be fine. Those things, style of play, and how do you mix it? When do you take your risks? Knowing when to take a risk, when not to. That's a hard learn. I thought it'd be easier than it is, but it's a hard learn.
It is, because that's a mindset thing too. On the stroke, because he's got the little bit longer delivery. Is that an easy thing to tighten up for a young kid?
Yeah, I think it will be. I think it'll be an easy thing for him to tighten up. Andrew did tighten. I think Andrew shortened his stroke considerably and ended up becoming one of the really accurate guys that I've been around. And I think he worked hard on his technique. So I think that and Drake will do the same thing. He will work extremely hard. He knows he has to shorten that thing down a little bit. It was something that kind of last year it was kind of one of those things that like this will be a good time for him to do it whenever someone takes him. It's your senior year or it's your last year, and then it's then you don't want to mess him up before the combine, and you don't want to mess him up before his pro day, and you just kind of push it down the road a little bit, but it'll have to be addressed, and he will address it, and I think it'll help.
It can't hurt, but changing the throwing motion is a pretty big deal. And if they think they can do that and they think he's worth it, he'll be their number 2 pick a week from tomorrow, right? Draft is a week from tomorrow. Clyde Christensen, he's worked with some incredible quarterbacks over the years, including Brady and Manning and Andrew Luck, and he's had great success doing that, and he's analyzed what he's seen from Drake Maye the last 2 years. But remember, he's employed by North Carolina, and he's going to give you that North Carolina slant. Orioles preview coming up next. We'll talk to the TV voice of the team, Kevin Brown, as we continue. It's the Andy Pollin Show, ESPN 630.